This is the first summer that I was intimately aware that I do not have an infinite amount of summers left in my life. And that I should and I ought to take advantage of these summers because they're not going to be around forever. Somehow I just became incredibly aware of my own mortality this summer, which is insane because it wasn't that long ago that summer seemed like an infinite amount of time anyway. When I was 8 years old, summer was forever long. It was so long that by the time that school came around in September, I was so ready to go back to school because I had been bored to death. That's how long summer was. But how many of us here felt that summer went by like that this year? Thank you. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it. Wasn't a rhetorical question. Actually, NPR had a story about a month ago about this very phenomenon. That the reason why when we were young, summer felt infinitely long, and while we are of more advanced age now, that summer seems to go by so quickly. They reported that when you are 8 years old, the 3 months of summer is 3% of your life that you have spent on Earth up to that time. So your relationship to the time-space abstract is such that it is 3% of all the time that you have spent on Earth. So it feels incredibly long. But if you are 40 like I am, somebody on the Harley wanted to have just a little bit more fun this summer. If you're 40, which I think is why I had a sense of my mortality, because I'm going to be taking motorcycle safety training here in a couple of weeks, and I think that's why, because I was looking at my life insurance policy. But if you're 40 years old like I am, then 3 months of summer is only 0.3% of your life. And if you're 80 years old, well then that's like 0.03% of your life. So your relationship to the time-space abstract is such that literally summer is shorter for you. There's a reason why it feels like it goes by so quickly, because when you are young, summer seems infinitely long. When you're 40, it seems to go by as quickly as a good nap. When you're 80, it's a blink of an eye. So when I was young, during the summer, I had a tremendous amount of unsupervised, unscheduled play. Did you have that growing up? Now, I'm not going to stand up here and say, like, back in my day, get off my lawn, kind of stuff. But when I grew up, it was different than the way that kids grow up today. And that is neither good or bad. It's just different for the kids and for their families and their parents. I was consistently telling my father, I am bored to death. And his favorite phrase when I shared that with him was, I don't care. Go outside. I don't want to see you for 3 hours. 3 hours of unsupervised play by myself and my friends in the wooded area where animals and sticks and stones and falling down could have really hurt me. That is not the way that kids do summer now. It's camps and schedules and practices and trainings and learnings and vacations. And everyone is everywhere, all over the place. And parents have to schedule their time to be able to move their kids from point A to point B to point C. And unsupervised, unscheduled play just isn't the norm anymore. Remember what it was like to be bored? When was the last time you were bored? Like really bored? We don't ever have to be bored in our lives, because all of us have devices which are meant to entertain us 24/7. I can tell you the last time I was really bored was a month ago at Disneyland. I was there visiting my sister and her kids and my brother-in-law. They had come in from Dallas. They invited me to go to Disneyland with them. They had been there already for 2 days, and so they had gotten their jump in line pass, the Cutter Pass. It's not the Fast Pass, it's the Cutter Pass, and we all know it's the Cutter Pass. And they got their Cutter Pass to go see the show at the very end of the park day with the projection on the water that's being thrown up into the air. And because I got there late, I didn't get a Cutter Pass. So when they went to go cut in line and find their place, I was left to defend for myself. But my phone had run out of juice because I'd been using it all day long. And so for 45 minutes, I was by myself in a strange land with no phone to entertain me. And so like so many of us, when we're bored, I got anxious. And to relieve myself of that anxiety, I did what so many of us do. I ate. Even though I wasn't hungry, I had just finished a wonderful Italian meal at a restaurant in Disneyland, and I was full. I was so anxious, I needed to do something to fill that space, so I went and bought caramel corn, even though I hate caramel corn. And I ate it, and I felt awful afterwards. And so for 20 minutes, I tried to entertain myself with empty calories. And then when that was done, I had to do something else. And I got bored. But in the midst of that boredom, I creatively started counting the number of languages that I heard in Disneyland, sitting by myself on a curb, waiting for this projection show to start. And I counted 7 languages, maybe 8, because my Anglo-Western ears aren't great in differentiating between Korean and Cambodian or Laotian. So there could have been another dialect in there. But 7 languages, the diversity around me just flooded me with this creativity of how cool it was to be there in the midst of all these people from around the world. But with the start of the technological revolution in the 1860s, we have increasingly advanced to a point where we never have to be bored again. Human beings, at the beginning of the technological revolution, were able to have so much free time which led to boredom which led to creativity. And in the midst of that creativity, we created even more technological advances, to the point that we created something so technologically advanced that we never have to be bored again. But Susan Sontag, the great writer and filmmaker, really a great 20th century American intellectual, says that boredom is the first state to be able to have infinite creativity. And without boredom, then we lose this opportunity to be creative and participate in the creative spirit. Modern technology, modern technological advances in the 60s, the 40s, 50s, and 60s in our country were unparalleled at the time. The booming of the automobile, of the assembly line, of business, of television, at first helped us. The automobile gave us a freedom to move about that we had never experienced before. Television disseminated information so fast that we were able to literally be on the moon with the astronauts in real time. It created a convenience for the family or for the person on the move. And because when we were an agrarian culture, we used to walk outside our front door to go to work. And then in a cosmopolitan culture, we would walk around the corner to go to work. In the suburban culture, which we find ourselves in today with the automobile, some of us drive hours to get to work. I have a friend whose child goes to school in La Jolla. And they drive to get her back and forth to La Jolla. 2 hours, one way there, another way back. But there are teachers who live in Tijuana who can spend up to 2.5, 3, 4 hours a day in their car just to get to work. And so as these technological advances seeped into our American culture, we developed something else to help the family on the move: fast food and TV dinners. It mirrored this food advancement, it mirrored the technological advances of the automobile, the assembly line, the television. It also helped because women were going back to work in the 50s and 60s and 70s in droves in ways that they'd never done before. Schools created extracurricular activities so diverse that any type of child, not just athletes, could participate in extracurricular activities. The work week expanded from 40 hours to 45 hours to 50 hours, and that became acceptable for every single person, to a point now that we shame people if they aren't willing to work extra time. And fast food was convenient. Convenient way to fill the void that happened when the automobile moved us from downtown to the suburbs and we no longer had a neighborhood market. In response to all of this and the technological movement that has had a great deal of success, and may I say, when I was a child, going to McDonald's was a huge treat. And I'm not here to say that you shouldn't eat fast food or microwave your dinners or anything. I'm just saying there were some repercussions to those advances. And in response to those, the slow food movement started in Italy in 1981. The slow food movement was meant to sort of counteract some of the repercussions of fast food and TV dinners being introduced into Italian society. Within a decade of fast food being introduced into Italy, childhood diabetes and childhood obesity rates already started to go up. So the slow food movement was meant to counteract that and to preserve traditional cuisine and support local farmers and ranches and economy. And it really was one of the first real movements to be green and to take into account what all this fast food and mobility was doing to our environment. But that is not the way that I grew up. I grew up sitting on the counter in my parents' kitchen as my mom and dad and sisters and I prepared food together. How many of you grew up that way? And it wasn't just the food that we prepared together, which was meaningful. Other things happened in the kitchen, taking a longer amount of time to probably make a more nutritious, but we all know there's nothing that nutritious about German chocolate cake. And as we made dinner together, my parents also taught me life skills. I'm a great cook because my mom and my dad took the time while I was in the kitchen with them to teach me how to cook. I can iron like nobody else. If I took this jacket off, one, you'd see that I've already sweated through this shirt. And two, you would see a very slick and straight crease right down my sleeve. Starch is your friend when you're ironing. But when I wasn't cooking in the kitchen with my family, I was ironing. So I know how to iron. We also talked about our days and what was going on in our life. My parents taught me morals and ethics in the kitchen. We would talk about this person that we liked. And how do you take, and when you're a teenager, how do you make an advancement towards someone who you're attracted to? We would talk about a teacher who we didn't understand and the problems of being a teenager. We would talk about being bullied or ostracized. Or what am I going to do with my future? And being in the kitchen with my parents on a consistent and regular basis connected me to the heritage of my family. Many of the recipes we cooked came out of a cookbook, which had handwritten recipes from my grandmother's grandmother in it. That was being passed down to my generation and then on to the generation following me. These are all ways in which we counteract this fast food, mobile culture, which has fragmented and isolated so many people. And in 1999, a slow church movement began in Pennsylvania in a Presbyterian church. And Reverend Christopher Smith, an ordained Presbyterian, the author and the father of the slow church movement, said that there were 5 planks to a slow church. The first plank was that in the culture of instant gratification, we seek peace and patience. In a culture of labor-saving devices, we seek to use our God-given gifts and talents to problem solve. When's the last time you didn't use a calculator? In the culture of ceaseless busyness, we seek to practice Sabbath, to rest, and to take a break. In a culture of entitlement, we seek to practice stewardship, of responsibility and gratitude. And in a culture of materialism and greed, we seek to practice hospitality. The sacred wisdom found in Ecclesiastes asks and tells us that for every time there is a season. But the question that is before us today are we taking that time? Because there is a time to be busy, but there is a time to be slow. There is a time to be hectic, but there is a time to be still. There is a time for us to be running around like we have our heads cut off. But there is a time to be still and know that I am God. The church, a slow church movement, takes the principles of the slow food movement, of sustainability and fairness and regional cuisine, and transplants it into ethics, ecology, and economy. The church has to begin to mirror the ethos of the slow food movement, that in this contemporary world, we do drive-through communion. Have you ever noticed that? We stand up here, you motor down the center aisle, you quickly take your snack, and then you return to your seat, all on a conveyor belt of movement. Never slowing down, never taking a time to ponder, never taking the time to be in the awe of this sacred meal for God's sacred people. This is a good time of year to slow down, because the culture is going to ask you to speed up. Back to school, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. If you don't take the time, the culture will not give it to you. Our Jewish brothers and sisters tonight will begin their new year. Rosh Hashanah, 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur, a time of awe and reflection and sacredness. It's a reflective time to look back on your year so that you can prepare for the year to come, to slow down, to take Sabbath, and to rest. Maybe you'd like to take these 10 days and walk with our sisters and brothers of our Jewish tradition to reflect on the year that has been, so that you may be prepared for the year to come. Or maybe you're looking for a simple prayer, a prayer to ground you and to slow you down. May I recommend the prayer that the choir just provided for you? Christ with me. Christ above me. Christ to the right of me. Christ behind me. Christ to the left of me. Christ beneath me. Christ before me. Christ in me. Doing that for a simple amount of time each day to reflect, to be still, to slow down. There is a time for everything under heaven. Are you taking the time for you, for God, for the earth? Are you taking enough time, slowing down, so you can be bored? The sacred gift of boredom. Oh. Amen.